Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the One Room Schoolhouse. Last time we talked a little bit about the 1619 Project and some of what
these guys.
Yeah, these guys, these jokers. And what President Trump is talking about, maybe withholding federal funds from any schools that try to use this drivel as curriculum. And so now we want to kind of dive in a little bit more into the ideological kind of underpinnings of the 1619 Project and look a little bit more in depth on why it's wrong from an ideological basis and a factual basis. And one of our favorite Bible verses in looking at what we do and talking about, how do we really discern between all the different voices, what is right and what is wrong, is Proverbs 18:17. And it says that one side seems right until the other comes along to cross-examine it. And it's a universal principle because, I'm a younger sibling, I have an older sister, and I learned very quickly, in arguments, it wasn't necessarily who was right and who was wrong, it was who was faster and could get to mom and dad first to tell them what the truth is, right? The truth is. And then, obviously, whoever was slower came along, and then we were able to work things out a little bit more justly, but that principle continues on today. And for so many people, they have heard about 1619. They've heard about, it's all the ills in America go back to white people, go back to the Constitution, because the Constitution was written only by white people and only for white people, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's the only thing that they've heard. But as soon as the real story comes apparent, it tells a totally different narrative, which is radically different than what you get in this type of stuff.
It's what you get in the courts of law, because in courts of law, we establish in due process the 4th through 8th Amendments. We take that principle from Proverbs 18:17, and we take also what we have from Jesus in John 8, where he says, "Woman, where's your accuser?" You get to confront your accuser. So if you only, in a trial, and someone's up for some kind of criminal offense, if the defense attorney is the only one to present his side of the story, you're going to release every person who's ever been arrested. If the prosecution is the only one to present their side, you're going to throw everybody in jail. So that's why you have to listen to the defense and the prosecution. You have to take all of that and put it together and say, where's the truth in all of this? Here's one side, here's the other, and where's truth? I think this guy's guilty. I think this guy's innocent. So you have to find the truth. And this is one of the things that historically happens all the time. I'm going to take Abraham Lincoln for a little bit. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president,
Maybe you've heard of him. Did some
possibly.
things.
You think so?
Yeah, maybe. He's kind of a big guy.
Anybody got a $5 bill around? It's
well, no.
I
don't have one.
Bill, so
but I'm sure you have one, and I'd love to hold it for you.
I bet you would. So, yeah,
boss.
Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, boss. Thank you. You have Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln, there's two sides being told about Abraham Lincoln. One side came out in the late 1880s after Lincoln's death, this book by William Herndon. And William Herndon came out with this book. It's called The Life of Lincoln. Now, Herndon was a law partner to Abraham Lincoln. Herndon was what was called a free thinker, an atheist, and Abraham Lincoln was a free thinker, an atheist, and they got together in a law firm together, both as free-thinking atheists. And so in 1880s, this book comes out about Lincoln the atheist, the freethinker. Now, this is after he's been assassinated, and people think of him in terms of the Gettysburg Address and what he said about God, and his second inaugural address about praying, his proclamations for prayer. And you go, wow, he's an atheist? This guy worked with him. This guy knew him. And then after that came out this book by Charles Minor called The Real Lincoln. Oh, you think you know Lincoln? You think he's religious. He's not. He's an atheist, because Herndon tells us that.
And he said it just like that, too.
Exactly. So it goes through, and it shows. And now there's even a newer, more modern book by De Lorenzo saying atheist Lincoln. So you've got this line of this guys kind of being atheists, but there's another side of the story. And you pick up a book like this from the early 1900s. It's called Abraham Lincoln, the Christian. And it has all these accounts of people who knew him saying he's a Christian, he's a Christian, he's a Christian. You have this book that came out. It's called the Lincoln Memorial Album. This is right after his assassination. And in here, there's the testimony of an Illinois clergyman, and Lincoln was from Illinois. And this is what this clergyman says. This is what Lincoln told me. He said, when I left Springfield, Illinois, I asked the people to pray for me. I was not a Christian. When I buried my son, the severest trial of my life, I was not a Christian. But when I went to Gettysburg and saw the graves of thousands of our soldiers, I then and there consecrated myself to Christ. Yes, I do love Jesus. So you've got two sides of an argument going on here. So how do you know what's right and what's not? And it's very interesting. This is a letter done by Reverend James Smith. And this letter by James Smith talks about Lincoln. And here's the background of the story. Lincoln starts out being raised in a Christian family, but his father, who professes to be Christian, is very abusive. It's like he goes to church and comes home, gets drunk, and beats the kids up. Well, Lincoln says, I want nothing to do with that Christianity, so he becomes an atheist. He stays an atheist. He becomes a town atheist. He learns the Bible to argue against preachers and Christians. This is when he gets connected with Herndon. And so Herndon, he's a free thinker. Lincoln's a free thinker. They're both attorneys together. Lincoln becomes a judge. And then this comes along in 1852. And Pastor Smith said, I was approached by this attorney named Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln came to me and said to me, I don't want you to talk to me about God because as a judge, as an attorney, I believe in looking at both sides, and I've looked at all the available evidence on whether God exists, whether Jesus is real, and said the evidence is overwhelming. God is real and Jesus is real, so I am no longer an atheist. I need someone to teach me spiritually, and I've looked at you in your church. I want you to teach me. So Pastor Smith becomes the mentor for Lincoln for the next several years, becomes a close family friend. When Lincoln's assassinated, it's Pastor Smith that takes his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and the kids over to England and Europe to get them away from the turmoil in America. So you start seeing Lincoln's got this spiritual journey that's going on. And so in this letter is actually designed at Herndon, because Herndon comes out after Lincoln's become a Christian and says, oh, Lincoln's a free thinker. And Smith says, no, you're still talking about him back in the 1840s and 50s. You're not talking about him after he became a Christian. And so what happens is there are Confederate apologists today who hate Lincoln because Lincoln was on the Union side and the Confederacy lost. And so they say Lincoln was an atheist. And, well, these are the books they point to. Or you can get this whole stack of hundreds of books. You can get letters like this that say, no, there's more to the story. And when you see the stories, but see, that's the background behind the 1619 project.
Yeah, and so that same principle of we have to be able to go in and look at the sources and weigh the sources, right? Because if you only base it off of these two books, this kind of small minority of people who are really misrepresenting facts, and you ignore the vast testimony of all the other eyewitnesses, right? If you think about it as just like we talked about earlier, it's a law trial. Are you able to prove that this is more likely than not the case? And what's fascinating is with the 1619 Project, for all their talk about how America is racist, they rely on purely racist thinkers in order to come to that conclusion. Guys like this guy right here, John C. Calhoun.
Now this is one of the scariest pictures you may see.
Yeah, look at this guy. He's not necessarily a nice person to look at. And he really wasn't a nice person.
He wasn't a nice person.
He is really the guy who lays the ideological bedwork for the Confederacy during the 1830s and the nullification crisis, this idea that states can voluntarily reject kind of federal law, that they can secede. He really kind of lays the egg that the Confederacy hatches during the Civil War. Right. And what's fascinating is that the 1619 Project writers, they basically take Calhoun's words as gospel. They adopt his view of the Constitution.
And by the way, let's just make it real clear at the time that there were so many who disagreed with Calhoun. One was Andrew Jackson, who had to deal with Calhoun. And Andrew Jackson and his administration came out with all sorts of other Southerners who had an opposite opinion of Calhoun, including Washington and Jefferson and Madison, all these founding fathers.
Everybody disagreed with this guy. He had a wrong view of the Constitution, and he wasn't in the majority, right? I mean, and he wasn't able to persuade a lot of people. It was just afterwards the Confederacy looked back and said, oh no, we're just doing what Calhoun told us to do. But he by no means is this repository of truth for the Constitution, because the guys who actually were there helping write the Constitution, like George Washington and James Madison and all these other guys, disagree with Calhoun. But the 1619 Project, in order to misrepresent the facts, in order to recast America and the Constitution as this terribly racist document and terrible country, they have to rely on these fringe elements of ideological hogwash in order to even create something that even sounds reasonable.
And the point you made, I mean, he is one of the biggest racists of all times. Now, he is from South Carolina. He would never be able to survive if he was in Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or New Hampshire or most of the northern states. They would chase him out because their thinking is so opposite to his. But also out of the same area, when you take the secession, and you know, he as you said, that was the egg that the Confederacy hatched for secession, and your president becomes Jefferson Davis, and your vice president of the Confederacy is Alexander Stephens. Alexander Stephens of Georgia gives this big speech about how slavery is the cornerstone of the Confederacy. The Confederacy lost the war. They were a minority even in the nation population-wise. They lost on the philosophical side. They lost on the political side. 1619 Project takes guys like the Alexander Stephens, the Jefferson Davis, the John C. Calhoun, said, this is what America was built on. No, this is what America defeated. There's a whole different side. You take what the Pilgrims did and the abolitionists and the John Quincy Adams and the John Adams and John Hancocks. They don't talk about any of it. Yeah. So, and this is like being the prosecution or the defense attorney, just one side in a trial, and you only present one side and say, now, jury, give us your verdict.
Yeah, it really is. No. It really is. I mean, it's a classic example of a straw man argument, right? I'm going to create this fake reality and call it America, but I'm only going to use the ideas of guys like John C. Calhoun. I'm only going to use these kind of fringe elements, these terrible, disproven and disagreed with even at the time ideologies, to create some country that doesn't exist, and I'm going to attack that country and make people believe that that's what America is today, when in fact it's not, nor was it ever that country that they're talking about. And so it really is just, I mean, complete, you know, it might look pretty, it might have nice pictures, and it might have words that, you know, at least look to be sentences, but it really doesn't mean anything.
It's got a lot of money behind it too. It has a lot of money and a lot of clout.
Well, we can't talk about that.
Well, but that's part of it. But what goes with this is, for all of us, what should be the most important thing is the pursuit of truth. We want a land where truth lands, where absolute truth lands, not your opinion of truth, but truth. And if the truth is that America is racist, let's deal with it. Now, the truth is that America has had racism, and there's been racism in America, and it's been continually beat back. It's not always beat back, because as long as people are involved, you're going to have flaws. And some people are racist, and therefore you're going to have some racism. But institutionally, oh my gosh, we've been beating this back for a long time. Nobody talks today of the fact that we had blacks elected to office in 1641 in Maryland, or in 1768 in New Hampshire, or in 1793 in Pennsylvania, or all the black heroes in the war. They think the American Revolution is nothing but white guys. Oh my gosh, right at the start, black guy. Right at the end, a black guy. They're key to the start and end of the revolution, and it's filled with black guys in between.
You can't tell the story of the American Revolution or America as a nation without including the black heroes and black patriots that helped found this country.
That's right.
In fact, it's fascinating, even going back to the Revolutionary War, the African American men who volunteered for the military served, what is it, four and a half times longer. 4.5 times longer than the white soldiers in the Revolutionary War. So the most skilled, the most veteran part of the army that won our independence were the African American soldiers.
And by the way, the first regiment, the first Rhode Island regiment, was a black regiment of 400 free blacks, and the British hated fighting them because they got their ears pinned back when they did. And the British officers report to their commanders, don't make me fight those guys, because my guys will kill me if we have to go. I mean, they were some of the best fighters, the best leaders, and they were so respected by both sides. We just don't hear those stories anymore.
There's so much more, and you won't hear any of that from places like this that use straw man arguments that rely on disproven philosophies from fringe elements of the past, because it's agenda-driven and not truth-driven. But if you want to know more about the real story behind American history, and you want to know more about these amazing black heroes and patriots, our founding fathers, then check out this book. It's called The American Story. It's coming out soon. You can find it at WallBuilders.com. So check it out. You'll learn so much more of the real story, and it will provide a good counterpoint in order to kind of refute a lot of the bad ideas, a lot of the ahistorical claims that are made in things like the 1619 Project. It'll help you better discern what truth is, and don't just take our word for it. In the back of this book, we have over 1,000 footnotes that go back to primary or early secondary sources. Look for yourself, do the research, dig into the past to discover what really did happen, because you'll find that the truth is, one, a lot more encouraging than what we hear from places like the New York Times, which I think used to be a newspaper, and places like CNN. The truth is always better, and it's what we need to stand on. So check it out, wallbuilders.com, and join us next time on the One Room Schoolhouse.